In today's Haftorah, Hashem draws attention to the fact that when He took us out of Egypt, we went after Him with the love of our youth. Hashem said, "I'll remember the love of your youth," meaning that we just were a new nation coming out of Egypt, and we didn't have that much experience with seeing Hashem's miracles, and yet we followed Hashem out in the desert. So Hashem says, I remember the love of your youth. I remember how you walked out. I remember how you walked out in the desert to be with me. So I want to share with you a story that happened actually on a Saturday night like this one. I don't know of many letters that they ever wrote on a Saturday night. I think it's a very unusual thing that they ever to put out a letter on Saturday night, and I think it's probably because of unique circumstances and of what happened, and that made this to be an emergency status. What happened was, it's hard to understand why I'm saying the word emergency, but I'll just say this: Chassidim really care about the Rebbe, and so something happens that they feel that may have caused pain to the Rebbe, it bothers them. So this woman, her son, who was in 1978, it was a few months after the Rebbe's recovery from his heart attack, and 24th of Tammuz, and her son went over to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe left the shul, and he went to say to the Rebbe, "Good Shabbos." And he shook the Rebbe's hand. He was 4 years old, Menachem Levi, and he took the Rebbe's hand. He shook it a few times. "Good Shabbos, Rebbe. Good Shabbos, Rebbe." Doesn't sound like a big deal, right? But his mother was mortified. Here, her son had bothered the Rebbe, so she wrote a letter to the Rebbe right after Shabbos, and she wrote, "I feel very bad that my son bothered the Rebbe." So the Rebbe responded. I'm going to literally read word for word of this beautiful response that Rebbe wrote to her. And right away on Saturday night, he responded to her immediately. The opposite. He caused pleasure to me through this. He caused nachas to me. Why? Because you cannot imagine the great heartiness, the great heartfelt feelings, v'apashtus, and the simplicity, v'atmimus, and sincerity, shall yelled of a child. You can't imagine how great the worthiness of the heart of a child, and simplicity and the sincerity of a child is. I wish I wish that we would see some of this, at least a little bit of this, by adults, especially based upon what chassidus says about this. And this is especially relevant as this happened this happened after the conclusion of the Haftorah. The Haftorah talks about the love of your youth, and so therefore it's this event, this child running over and shaking the Rebbe's hand and wishing him a good Shabbos with sincerity, it's very in sync with the theme at the conclusion of the Haftorah, the love of youth. May God help you raise this child, Menachem, and all your other children to Torah, chuppah, to Torah, to marriage and good deeds. I will mention you for prayer at my father-in-law's resting place. So that's the first story, and it underlines how important it is to not be so important, not to be so stuck in our heads, and to be so stiff, and not to open our hearts to do things with sincerity and truthfulness, and not to be limited by what makes sense or doesn't make sense. That this child, Rebbe is pointing out, look at the way a child acts. It's so beautiful. So halavavi is the heart, the simplicity, the sincerity. It's a way to go. Anyways, on that note, I'll share stories of miracles which bring out our simple faith like a child in Hashem, The first story I probably shared a long time ago. I don't remember, but it's a beautiful story, and goes like this. There was a Jew who served as secretary for Rabbi Liberov, who was the Rebbe's emissary to Morocco. His name was Mimun Malka. And Mimun Malka, he would take care of Rabbi Liberov's office, and the and other things that happened there. I heard this story from someone who heard it directly from Mimun Malka. Mimun Malka shared the story to someone who shared it with me. So this woman had lost one child. Unfortunately, Rachmana litzlan, may Hashem protect us, when the child reached close to the age of bar mitzvah. And now her second child was turning bar mitzvah, and he got sick. She was very concerned that perhaps this child also would pass away as her first child. So she asked Rabbi Liberov for a blessing and to ask the Rebbe for his blessing. This story took place, I don't remember if it was the 50s or the 60s, but either way it was very hard to send a letter back and forth from Morocco to New York. And the earliest expected time to get a response, if the letter arrived and it was read the same day, would have been a month, about 4 weeks for a letter to get to New York and come back from New York. And so this woman was very concerned about her son. So she didn't wait for the 4 weeks to be over to find out what had happened. And she came to Rabbi Liberov every day. What did the Rebbe say? He's like, listen, you can't expect there to be an answer. It takes time for the letter to arrive. She came what did the Rebbe say? What did the Rebbe say? Her son's not well. What did the Rebbe say? I need a blessing for my son. And he didn't have much to tell her. But not only a month passed, but a second month passed, and a third month passed, and every day she was coming, is there an answer from the Rebbe for me? No, there was no answer. After 6 months, a letter comes back from the Rebbe. The letter goes like this: Haksav einei barer, hayel yilm b'yeshiva. Your writing isn't clear. The child should learn in the yeshiva. So you understood this was about this child. Although the child wasn't well enough to attend the yeshiva, the Rebbe is saying that they should at least enroll him in the yeshiva. Just being enrolled in a wholesome, good environment is itself a great blessing. So enroll the child in a Jewish school. Rabbi Liberov, together with the other emissaries of the Rebbe to Morocco, Rabbi Raskin and Rabbi Pinson, they had set up many schools in Morocco, in many cities there. So they should sign him up to the school. Okay, he shares this with the lady, and she has some instruction, and thankfully the child recovers. Rabbi Mimun Malka, he was entrusted by Rabbi Liberov to take care of his office, as I mentioned, and before Passover he would be the one to clean the office as well. He's cleaning the office, and he sees this letter that this lady had given him. He had assured he had sent the letter, but he never sent it. It was still in his office. He never sent the letter. That's perhaps what the Rebbe meant. The writing isn't clear. You haven't really sent the letter, but here's the answer for that child. Anyways, that story was in the 50s or 60s. Here's a more contemporary. Well, it wasn't. It's in 1990. Tafshin Nun. Rabbi Zeitlin, the Rebbe's emissary to Tzfas, would often bring people from Tzfas to see the Rebbe, and he had someone who worked for him. I believe he has a son in Los Angeles here, Ehud Bashari. I think he was actually here 2 years ago. Ehud worked for Rabbi Zeitlin, and he would go with him in his trips to the Rebbe. When they would go with the whole group to the Rebbe, he would go as well. And what he would do is he would go around Tzfas, and he would collect letters from various people who wanted the blessing from the Rebbe. And so he had like a whole, hundreds of letters from all kinds of people that wanted the Rebbe's blessing. As he put it all together, and he was going to go for Hanukkah to the Rebbe. Before he left, he was blessed, he and his wife were at that time blessed with 5 children. His wife was already in an advanced stage of pregnancy, and because she was such an advanced stage of pregnancy, it would be more difficult for her to be alone for a week and a half while he went to New York. So it wasn't like she didn't agree that he could go, but it wasn't easy for her. It was more like, let's say the word begrudgingly, that she knew this was his job, this was an important thing, but it wasn't easy for her. Anyways, she also wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and he took that letter as well, and he told her, I have a whole package of letters from everyone else, but I want to put your letter somewhere else. I want to take that letter with me myself. When I go to see the Rebbe myself, I want to take that so I can give that to the Rebbe directly. Instead of just with everyone else, I wanted to do, as my wife, I want to give the Rebbe your letter together with my letter. Whatever, that's what he felt. He goes to New York, spends a beautiful Hanukkah in New York, comes back, and his wife is going through the suitcase, and sure enough, what does she find? Her letter. He had never given a letter to the Rebbe, and she was very upset. Here he had left for a week and a half, and ostensibly he's going there on behalf of herself and the community to go ask for blessings for all of them, and he forgot to give the Rebbe her letter. So upset. She was mortified. Anyways, 5 to 7 days pass. A letter comes from the Rebbe in the mail for Dvorah B'Sheri. The letter says, in answer to your request for a blessing from the 16th of Kislev. She had written her letter on the 16th of Kislev. The letter never got to the Rebbe physically. It never arrived. And the Rebbe is sending her letter back. In answer to your letter from the 16th of Kislev, your request for blessing is received, and I send you my blessing. She got a letter in the mail, a published letter. It's unbelievable. The Rebbe displayed open divine inspiration in something that's concrete, printed in a letter. I probably shared this last week. David Isser probably remembers, but I'll share it again. Amazing thing. There was a Jew from Bulgaria who said to the Rebbe that he said to his friend who told the Rebbe that he will start keeping Shabbos and kosher as long as the Rebbe will show him a miracle. If he sees a miracle, then he'll start keeping Shabbos and kosher. So the Rebbe said, why would a person want to get into a situation where they are in a state of discomfort and need a blessing and need to be saved? It's not a comfortable situation to be in. It would be a lot better to not have to deal with the situation, especially, the Rebbe said, because you already were in that situation and God already saved you from that situation. So why would you want to be in that situation again and live with that kind of fear? And the Rebbe added another point. How about the fact that someone who has never met you knows about the situation you were in and how your life was in danger and you were saved? Is that not enough of a sign for you? Should that not be enough for you to start keeping kosher and Shabbos? As soon as you hear this, you're waiting for a sign. Okay, and now for our featured story. Are you ready? Here we go. So, I want to thank Rabbi Reber for sending me this story. The story was ratified by one of the people in the story, Rabbi Motel Krzyzanski, the Rebbe's emissary to one of the Rebbe's emissaries to Australia. In 2010, he hired a certain gentleman to be his chazan for the high holidays, and every so often, the cantor had a paper in his prayer book, and he would look in the prayer book every so often to check this paper. It was a little weird. Krzyzanski said to him, hey, what do you have in that paper? So he said, I once visited the Rebbe, and I told the Rebbe I'm going to be a cantor somewhere, a chazan, and the Rebbe said I should remember that I'm praying to God. And I realized this was a very relevant message to me, because I was so concerned about my performance as a cantor. I didn't really consider the fact that I was that I'm speaking to God, that it's real, that Hashem listens to my words, and whether I'm interested or not interested, there is a true Hashem who is listening to every word that I say, and my words matter to him. He's listening. I didn't think about that, and when I said it, really like woke me up. I decided to write those words down on a piece of paper, and read those words every so often to remind me of what I'm doing. You have to remember you're davening to God. I wrote those words. That's those words on the paper. The words say, remember you're davening to God. Okay. Rabbi Krasniansky said, well, that's very interesting. Tell me, how did you as living in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel, not coming from a Chabad background, how did you end up visiting the Rebbe? I said, he says, I have a story for you. The story was that he would go every Thursday. This week was the Yahrzeit of Orach Chaim. He would go every Thursday to Mount Olives in Israel, and he would pray by the gravesite of the holy Orach Chaim HaKadosh. He would pray there every Thursday, and one week he's there. It wasn't a very safe area, and there was an Arab who had drawn a knife, a machete, and he had to run away, he had to escape, and he survived. But his mother was so upset. His mother said, if you ever go back there, I'm not your mother anymore. I'm divorcing you as a mother. You cannot go back there. You're scaring me. So he really wanted to go back there. He was going there every week, every Thursday. So he really didn't know what to do. So his mother agreed that they would ask the Rebbe for advice. He wanted to go, she didn't want to go. Let's ask the Rebbe. So he asked the Rebbe for advice, and the Rebbe said to ask a rabbi. So they asked the very prominent halachic authority, Rabbi Yitzchak Weiss. Rabbi Yitzchak Weiss said, well, if the Rebbe is saying to ask a rabbi, it doesn't seem that he's negating the... if the Rebbe wanted to say that it's dangerous, shouldn't go, he would say straight out. Apparently, said Rabbi Yitzchak Weiss, the Rebbe actually wants you to go, and he just wants to get the blessing of Torah to protect you. So therefore, my suggestion is you continue going there, and as with the power of Torah, I'm going to give you a halachic ruling that you're allowed to go there. With this halachic ruling, you will be blessed and you'll be protected where you are. So, okay. So Rabbi Krasniansky, he sent something. And he said, but that itself, tell me that itself, how did you decide, of all people in the world, of all rabbis in the world, how do you decide to ask the Rebbe this question? So he said that, you're right. The reason I came to the Rebbe was like this. He said that my wife and I were blessed with twins, and one of the twins had a condition, and we went to all kinds of rabbis and all kinds of people to get advice, to get a blessing. And one of them said, you're dealing with a very serious thing, you should go to the Rebbe. So I asked the Rebbe for advice, and the Rebbe said, ask a roife yedid mumcha. Ask a doctor who is both an expert and a friend. An expert and a friend. I don't think it's a... usually the Rebbe says to ask either a doctor who's a friend or a doctor who's an expert. The Rebbe said usually ask a doctor who's both a friend and an expert. So he and his wife didn't know who they should go to. They didn't have any doctors who were friends. But they have to go to somebody. So they went to their doctor. And when they come for the checkup, the doctor greets them with, my friend is here. And you're like, well, that's an interesting thing. Like, why'd you use that word? My yedid is here. Why did you say my yedid? Where does that come from? He says, you know what? I don't know. I saw you. I felt good when I saw you. I decided to call you my yedid. So they felt very encouraged by the fact that the doctor acknowledged their friendship and closeness. And sure enough, the doctor's advice worked, and thankfully their child recovered. That was a featured story. It reminded me of one more story. Rosa, hear the last story? The story is an interesting story. I heard the story for myself from Rav Nachshon. Rav Nachshon said that his wife was expecting a baby. He wanted to visit the Rebbe for the 11th of Nisan, the Rebbe's birthday. But on the other hand, his wife's expecting a baby any day, so maybe it's not a good idea to leave Israel while they're about to have a baby. But it's hard to understand again the kind of relationship that it was and how important it was to him. But let's just say it the way it is. It really did matter to him. So much so, he wrote a letter to the Rebbe asking the Rebbe if he can come to visit the Rebbe for the Rebbe's birthday in 11th and Nisan, despite the fact that his wife is very about to give birth. So the Rebbe responded, the Rebbe answered, ask a Chabad rabbi. That's a very unusual expression. The Rebbe doesn't use that expression usually. Ask an Orthodox rabbi, ask a local rabbi, ask a Chabad rabbi. Okay? So he asked Rabbi Marlow, the Rebbe's, the rabbi of Crown Heights, the head of the Beis and head of the Jewish court in Crown Heights. Rabbi Marlow said, Rabbi Marlow at that time was not yet, he was just starting his career. The previous rabbi, Rabbi Dvorkin, had just passed away. Rabbi Marlow was just starting his career as the rabbi, the head of the Jewish court in Crown Heights. And he asked Rabbi Marlow, I don't think Rabbi Marlow at that time was already appointed as a rabbi. It was more like people knew he would be appointed, but he wasn't yet appointed as a rabbi. Anyways, he asked Rabbi Marlow, what does this mean? Ask a Chabad rabbi, I want to ask you. So Rabbi Marlow said, the Rebbe didn't say to ask an Orthodox rabbi. He said to ask a Chabad rabbi, which means that the Rebbe wants the rabbi to answer you in a Chabad style. What's the Chabad style? What would a Chabad chassid say about someone visiting the Rebbe? A Chabad rabbi would say, it's a good idea. Go visit. 1 second. Oh, I skipped a part. The Rebbe also said, don't be in the room during birth. Ask a Chabad rabbi whether you should go, and you shouldn't be in the room during birth. That's in general an instruction that the Code of Jewish law says, that a husband shouldn't be in the living room at the time of active delivery. So, and something that the Rebbe called attention to many times, saying how even if someone's not so careful with all the laws of family purity, but this is something you should pay attention to, especially because a time of delivery is a very dangerous time. You want to really be clear in the eyes of God and man, and therefore you should not be in the room of delivery, living room during active delivery. Anyway, so Seber responded regarding his question whether you should go to New York, ask a Chabad rabbi, and don't be in the room during delivery. So Marlow said, listen, you're very familiar, and the Rebbe knows you're very familiar with his instruction about not being in the room. So why is Rebbe mentioning this? I was mentioning this because he wants to tell you, this is what Rabbi Marlow said, that you're going to be able to go to visit the Rebbe for Yidalf Nissen. You're going to have a Chabad answer. Come to the Rebbe for Yidalf Nissen. What about your wife giving birth? So the Rebbe is saying that your wife is going to give birth late, and therefore you're going to be able to come to be in the living room. So you'll be able to go there for Yidalf Nissen, and you'll be able to go back to New York, back to Israel, for the delivery. And that's exactly what happened. She did deliver late, and Rabbi Nachshon was able to visit the Rebbe for Yidalf Nissen and be there with his wife when they were blessed with a child. Point is that we have to, it says in the Torah, of them a person loses his faith, it's cut off from his lips. The previous Rebbe said, what makes a person lose his faith? By not talking about what we believe in, by not speaking openly what we believe in, that makes you lose your emunah. So you have to say stories of tzaddikim, share stories, share inspirational stories. That's what gives us and strengthens our faith in Hashem, our faith in tzaddikim. And Hashem should help us all. We should go to this new week, which is one of the 3 weeks, which is at the time of the destruction of the Bais Hamikdash. But Hashem should send us Mashiach, and when these 3 weeks will be transformed, the time of happiness, the greatest happiness. It also there are 21 days of holidays. If you add all the holidays up, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Postera, we have 21 days of holidays. So to the 21 days of the 3 weeks represent the 21 new days of holidays. We will have Mashiach comes. That the Tisha B'Av, and Shabbos, B'Tammuz, all these days be transformed to time of happiness and joy. And this is achieved especially by, in these 3 weeks, studying about the Beis Hamikdash, studying how the Beis Hamikdash was built, adding in Staka. Tzion is redeemed with Mishpat by studying Torah, studying about the Bais Hamikdash, and our captives are redeemed with Staka. May we see this happen immediately, the building of the third Bais Hamikdash. A good vach and a freil chavach.